Is keto dangerous? When Jillian Michaels made her statement about keto, there was a lot of confusion in the wake of that, a lot of controversy, a lot of opinions. A lot of people are quoting research and science. So we want to look a little bit at that, and we want to compare and contrast and try to understand the research versus real-life applications. So one of the statements I saw that really baffled me, and I looked into it, was this one, that saturated fat causes diabetes. And all the people that are opposed, they say science shows this and that. So let's look at what science shows. So there's lots of studies, there's hundreds of them, and when you start looking, you realize most of them, almost all, are done on mice and rats. So in some regards, that's valid. If you do research on a specific receptor to a certain chemical or the properties of a cell membrane or something, there's some similarities. But to say that the digestive tract and the food habits of mice and humans are relevant to compare, that's pretty far-fetched. So that's the least of my concerns, though. Because when I started looking a little deeper in, I looked for what is a high-fat diet, because that's what they're saying. A high-fat diet, saturated fat, can cause diabetes. So what does that mean? What are they feeding these animals? So turns out they feed them 21% protein. It's not so bad. And then 34% carbs. And I went, whoa, that's their high-fat diet? Anyone who's doing low carb or keto knows that low carb is probably 10% or less of calories from carbs. And if you want to go in ketosis, if you're really insulin resistant and you have to get into ketosis to turn it around, you're probably looking at 5% or less. And they're doing 35%. That's 7 times, 700% more carbohydrate than it takes to get into ketosis. So what that does is it maintains the insulin at sky-high levels, especially if you feed high glycemic carbohydrates like we're going to look at. So you can't eat fat. You're not going to burn the fat. You're not going to metabolize the fat in the presence of sky-high insulin. So that alone makes this completely unreliable. It's completely irrelevant. To call something high fat just because it has more fat than carbohydrates while maintaining the carbohydrates at a level that has no result on insulin resistance, it promotes insulin resistance, is purely ridiculous. But then let's look at, okay, so what did they actually feed these guys? Because we got the percentages, but what was the actual food? All right, so first they gave them lard. And that was probably the healthiest thing on there. But I doubt that pigs are really high on the food chain for mice. And if they start eating pigs, I don't think that they get the lard separated from the pig. I think they eat it as a whole. And they don't mix it in with soybean oil, which is one of the worst and most highly synthetic and processed oils that we have. So that was the fat. Terrible quality, maybe not so natural for the mouse. Then we look at the carbohydrates, and I thought I would fall off my chair. I thought they would give the guys some grain, maybe, but turns out they gave them cornstarch, maltodextrin, and sucrose. All three of which have a glycemic index sky high. It's basically rocket fuel. If you're trying to trigger insulin, you can't do much better than these three. Then we look at the protein, and they don't get any meat or insects or whole food protein. They get them an extract. They give them an isolate in the form of casein, which is a milk protein, but it has to be separated sort of through harsh processes from the milk. Then you give them calcium carbonate, which is chalk. And it's the main ingredient in Tums, and it's designed to neutralize stomach acid. So now the poor guys can't digest any of their protein, which means that they don't absorb the protein and it really doesn't do them any good anyway. And then they top it off with some synthetic vitamins that do more harm than good. So when you look at a study like this, and they look at a different species that I would argue is completely irrelevant in the big scheme of food for humans, then you call it a high-fat diet when in fact you give them a high-carb diet, and then you don't feed them any whole food, no natural food at all, but you top it off with synthetic chemicals and just processed isolates. It's preposterous. It's ridiculous. If you have any understanding of how nature operates outside of the test tube, then you would see that. But if you grew up in a lab with a test tube where all you know is numbers, maybe that makes sense to you. I don't know. So the people who perform these studies, they are academicians. They are at universities, they do research for companies, for processed food companies, etc. And they don't have to see patients. Most of them have never seen a patient. So they publish papers, they read papers, and they're in their little bubble, and they never have to face a patient and tell them why they're not getting better. So keto, on the other hand, is results-based. It has developed out of people who came out of school, who had the standard education, who learned the standard dogma of 60% carbohydrates and this many percent of this or that. And then they tried that on people and they saw that the people got sicker and sicker and sicker. And if you're conscientious and if you are caring, then at that point you're going to start looking for alternatives. If what you're doing isn't working, then let's try something else. So the people who are promoting keto are very often clinicians who have come from a point of needing different results. And then they share experiences. So keto is not a diet. There's no one that says, this is what keto is. You should eat this and this and this and this. Atkins was one person who said, eat this and this and this and this. Keto is a collaboration. It's a sharing of results and principles on what works. So the people who say that it's dangerous or base it on this, they're misinformed. The people who say that it doesn't work are misinformed. Pretty much everyone, though, they would agree at this point that keto works as far as burning fat, but then they can't quite buy the idea that fat would be okay, so they always end off with that little reservation that, well, you know, it burns fat, you reduce insulin resistance, you cure diabetes, but it's probably dangerous in the long run. Every year they have a vote on what's the healthiest diet and what's the worst diet. And they ask people to vote and to who are supposedly experts. And who are these experts? Well, they're the people in the universities. Last year, USA News, whenever they voted the DASH diet, look at who the people are who voted. They're PhDs, they're research scientists, they're at universities, they're at various different labs, and they don't have any clinical experience. So they don't work with people, they publish a paper, they read a paper, and they have to publish so many papers to maintain their tenure and to get the next grant for their next paper. So it's a little bit like a buddy club. They're sort of sitting in a bubble, and they don't have to help people get better. So keto is only dangerous if you do it wrong. That's the truth with anything. You can do anything right or you can do it wrong. And keto is perfectly healthy if you base it on whole food, on vegetables, on healthy meat from healthy animals and healthy fish that were raised in their natural environment, eating whatever they were supposed to for that species. And then you eat the healthy fats from avocados and nuts and butter, grass-fed butter, organic extra virgin olive oil, coconut butter, natural fats that haven't been molecularly altered like soybean oil. And if you eat whole food, then it is healthy for you. And then you reduce the carbs to reverse your insulin resistance, and you can start reversing your disease. I had to save the best for last. When I saw this, I was rolling on the floor. Sometimes they just give you golden nuggets. So in a paper I found, it was done in Sweden, and it said that there was an organization against animal cruelty that was participating and supervising this research, and they assured everyone that these experiments were conducted properly. There was no animal cruelty involved. And I'm sorry, but I think these animal rights people have to find some new criteria for what cruelty is. Because if you take a mouse and you feed it lard and soybean oil, cornstarch, maltodextrin, sucrose, casein, calcium carbonate, and synthetic vitamins, not one thing that they would find in their own life in nature. Not a single thing. Not one thing that any species could survive on very long. Then if that's not animal cruelty, I don't know what is. So understand what research is. I'm not opposed to research. I think it should be done. But we need to have not just cleverness, but some common sense also. We need to not just be intelligent, but we need to be wise and have the bigger picture and start relating it to physiology and human history and environment and to nature. I hope that was helpful. Please share this video with as many people as you can get it to. Leave your comments and questions below, and thanks for watching.